I've never been someone with many ambitions. I grew up hearing that I was smart, that I could be whatever I wanted, but the truth is, I never found myself in anything. High school was a blur of boring days and sleepless nights, and when I finally finished, all I felt was an immense emptiness. I tried to fit into what was expected of me, a job here, another there, but nothing seemed right. I was fired more times than I can count. With each new attempt, the frustration grew like a shadow, slowly consuming me. The smiles and expectations of those around me only deepened the abyss within. I was falling, and no one seemed to notice. That's why I found a sort of refuge in the depths of the internet. Most people only navigate the surface, but I dove deep, venturing into sites and forums that few would dare to explore. There, I found something that captivated me, something that made me feel different. I watched horror films and tapes that no one else knew about, productions so obscure and disturbing that they seemed designed to hit me directly in the gut. These sick masterpieces, often without budget, without a script, without any pretense of being art, were, to me, the raw truth of horror. My ritual was always the same. After an unbearable day, I would lock myself in my room, turn off the lights, put on my headphones, and lose myself in that nightmare universe. Each tape, each video, was like a new drug, feeding a hunger I didn't know I had. I felt alive, even if it was in a twisted way. Watching suffering, pain, death made me feel something, anything, amidst the numbness that was my life. On the forums, I was just a faceless name. An avatar in a dark corner of the web. There, I discussed with others like me, exchanged links, and reviewed the most grotesque and disturbing productions I could find. And the more macabre, the better. They said I had a strong stomach, that I could watch things that would make others vomit. Maybe it was true. Or maybe I was just so numb that nothing affected me anymore. But this constant search for something stronger, more disturbing, began to take over me. I no longer lived, I merely existed, waiting for the next video, the next tape. I distanced myself from the few people who still cared. My interactions were limited to those cold, emotionless conversations in the forums. There, I was free to be whoever I wanted, or maybe to be who I really was, an addict to terror, to pain, to death. Life out there became a distant dream, something I saw through a foggy glass. While the world kept turning, I sank deeper into this bottomless pit, lost in my own emptiness, not knowing that soon, this same addiction would consume me completely. That night, I was tired. More than usual. My eyes were burning from staring at the screen for so long, but the emptiness inside pushed me to keep going. I knew that somewhere, deep within the darkest corners of the web, there was something I hadn't yet seen. Something that could, perhaps, finally satisfy my hunger for horror. I scrolled through various forums, each one more obscure than the last, but nothing seemed new. The same recycled garbage, the same fake videos of staged deaths and poorly done torture. I was about to give up when I noticed a strange link in one of the threads, almost invisible, as if someone had purposely hidden it there, waiting for the right eyes to find it. I clicked without a second thought. The page that opened was simple, almost amateurish, with no information other than a long list of video files. Each one numbered sequentially, without titles, without descriptions. Just dates, spread over the course of months. Something about that digital silence unsettled me, but curiosity was stronger. I downloaded the first video. As it loaded, an uncomfortable feeling began to crawl down my spine, something I hadn't felt in a long time, fear. Not ordinary fear, but that subtle, creeping kind of fear that infiltrates your mind and whispers that maybe you've made a mistake. But, of course, I ignored it. When the video finally opened, I was met with a shaky image, as if the camera was being adjusted. It was definitely amateur footage. The image quality was terrible, but something deep inside told me this wasn't just a cheap horror production. There was no soundtrack, no quick cuts, just a static camera focused on a dark, dirty room. The place looked like a basement with bare concrete walls and a single old mattress on the floor. The camera was adjusted and the frame fixed on the mattress. After a few seconds, I heard the sound of a door opening, followed by the noise of dragging footsteps. A figure entered the frame, carrying something in their arms. It was a girl, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. She was thrown onto the mattress with casual brutality, and the camera zoomed in, focusing on her face. Her expression was pure panic. She squirmed, desperately trying to free herself, but the bonds were too strong. I watched, paralyzed, as the camera captured every detail of her despair. Her breathing was heavy and ragged, and her eyes were filled with a terror that seemed to spill out of the screen. At first, I still believed it was an act. An underground production, perhaps, made to shock. But as the video continued, something told me this was different. There were no cuts, no moments when the camera looked away. Everything was raw, direct, and terrifyingly real. The man who occasionally appeared in the footage never showed his face. He was methodical, calm, as if performing a routine task. The video went on for hours, showing the girl in the basement, without food, without water, screaming until her voice gave out. The camera captured every moment of her degradation until she finally stopped fighting, resigned to her fate. When the first video ended, my mind was foggy. I should have been disgusted, horrified, but instead, something in me wanted to see more. I needed to see more. Maybe it was just my addiction speaking, but I started downloading the other videos, one after the other, without stopping to think. Each video followed the same progression. The girl, growing weaker, more desperate, pleading for mercy that never came. And then, finally, death. It was slow, painful, and the camera stayed steady, capturing every second. I was trapped in that infernal sequence, unable to look away. Everything seemed so real that my brain began to scream that this was the truth. But I refused to believe it. It had to be a production, an extremely well-made film meant to disturb even the most hardened. But as the videos continued to play before me, a doubt began to creep in. What if it wasn't just a movie? What if I had stumbled upon something I was never meant to see? The following days were a blur. I isolated myself from the world, as I always did, but this time there was something more. The tapes, now permanently etched in my mind, wouldn't leave me alone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the girl's face, her eyes pleading for help, her hoarse voice begging for a rescue that never came. I kept watching the tapes, as if I were unable to stop. But over time, something changed. At first, it seemed to be just a defect in the recording, distorted images, flickering lines cutting across the screen for a few seconds. But then, these distortions started to become more personal. I noticed, between one frame and the next, that there was something in the videos that hadn't been there before. Dark figures would appear on the screen, too quick to be captured by the eyes, but present enough for my subconscious to register them. It was as if someone or something was watching both the girl and me. There were whispers too, low, almost inaudible, that seemed to come from within my own head. At first, I thought it was just the ambient sound of the video, but then I began to discern words. "I'm watching you," they said. "I know who you are." The phrases were murmured between the girl's screams, between her laments and her ragged breathing. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But deep down, something told me it wasn't just paranoia. I started to notice small changes around me. Things out of place, noises at night that I had never noticed before. I remember one night in particular when I heard a sound coming from the living room. It was late, and the apartment was plunged into darkness. I got from the chair, my bones aching from hours of immobility, and went to the door of my bedroom. In the hallway, something didn't seem right. There was a shadow on the wall, something I couldn't identify the source of. I stood there, paralyzed, trying to rationalize what I was seeing, but I couldn't. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. My heart was beating so fast that I could hear it in my ears. When I finally mustered the courage to take a step, the shadow moved. Not like something projected from a light source, but as if it had a life of its own. I turned my head, trying to follow it with my eyes, but it disappeared as soon as I looked directly at it. After that night, nothing seemed normal anymore. I locked the door and windows every night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching me. I started leaving the lights on, all of them, but that only seemed to make the shadows longer, more threatening. My sanity began to crumble. The isolation, which had once been a refuge, was now becoming a prison. I couldn't sleep. Every sound, every movement around me made me jump. My mind was on the brink of collapse, and deep down, I knew why. The tapes. They had something evil in them, something that was infiltrating my soul, corrupting everything I was. I began to believe that the person responsible for the tapes knew about me, that he was aware I was watching them, that somehow he was enjoying my suffering. Every time I watched, every time I tried to find logic in it, I felt as if I was being pulled deeper into an abyss from which there was no return. I became a prisoner in my own home. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the hallways felt longer, darker. Sometimes, I thought I heard footsteps outside my bedroom door, but when I checked, there was no one there. But I knew, deep down, that he was there, somewhere, waiting. That silent, crushing paranoia was destroying what was left of me. The idea that I might be being hunted, that I could be the next to appear in one of those tapes, was unbearable. But the worst part was knowing that, somehow, I had done this to myself. I searched for this. I wanted this. And now, it was consuming me. Paranoia took hold of me. The tapes, which had once been just a morbid obsession, became the center of everything. I locked the doors with meticulous care, checking and rechecking every lock, every latch. The windows were blocked by wooden boards that I nailed in place with my own hands to ensure that nothing and no one could get in. My house, which had once been a refuge, now felt like a fortress surrounded by invisible enemies. I cut off contact with the outside world. The phone was the first thing to go. Every ring, every vibration felt like a direct assault on my nerves, so I turned it off for good. The few people who still tried to reach me were ignored, their calls echoing in a silent house. I lived on canned food and water. Trips to the store became rare, and when I did go out, every step was torture. I looked around constantly, certain that I was being followed. No one seemed trustworthy, and the feeling was mutual. I was convinced that even the friendly faces had dark intentions. It didn't take long before I gave up leaving the house altogether. I locked myself inside, where I felt, somehow, that I was safer, though that safety was a desperate illusion. The tapes never left my mind. I saw them even when I wasn't watching. The images of the girl's face, her desperate eyes, her mouth moving in silent screams, haunted me every moment. When I finally managed to sleep, she waited for me in my dreams. But it wasn't just her suffering that I saw. In the dreams, she looked directly at me, as if she knew I was watching, as if she was aware of my presence. I began waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat, with the feeling that someone was in the room with me. The worst part was the silence that followed. That absolute silence that left my mind free to imagine all the things that might be lurking in the dark. More than once, I got out of bed and started searching the house, shining a flashlight into every corner, expecting to find something. the visions started subtly. A shadow here, a reflection there, always at the edge of my field of vision. But as the days passed, they became more intense, more real. I saw her everywhere. In the bathroom mirror, in the boarded-up window, on the screens of devices I kept turned off. Always her, always the girl, with that look of despair and accusation, as if blaming me for what had happened. I tried to convince myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but the feeling that she was really there, somehow, was overwhelming. When she appeared in the hallway for the first time, I thought I had finally gone mad. Her tangled hair, her pale and gaunt face, and those eyes that seemed to pierce my soul. I screamed, throwing myself against the wall, but when I looked again, she was gone. My life was unraveling in an endless cycle of terror and isolation. The walls seemed to close in on me, and daylight was a distant memory. I could no longer distinguish between what was real and what was the product of my broken mind. But one thing I was certain of, she was there, with me, inside that house. I felt her presence in every corner, in every shadow, in every distant sound that echoed through the empty hallways. Her death, captured on those tapes, had bound me to her in some way, and now I was trapped. Trapped in my own house, in my own mind, unable to escape the terror I had invited upon myself. With each passing day, I became more like her, lost, terrified, and above all, alone. I no longer know how much time has passed since I last saw the light of day. All that remains is darkness, both around me and within me. The walls of this place, which I once called home, have become an extension of my mind, a labyrinth with no exit where each step echoes like a desperate scream. My hands tremble as I write this. Fear has seeped into my bones, every cell in my body vibrating with relentless anxiety. The tapes have become my only company. I've watched each one countless times, searching. I don't know what. Answers, perhaps? Or just an end to this nightmare? The girl's face has become my only thought. Sometimes I wonder if she was trying to warn me, if her eyes full of despair were trying to communicate something I couldn't understand. I have distanced myself from everything and everyone. The few friends I gave up trying to reach me. And even if someone still cared, there's no way to contact me. My house is a fortress, and I am the voluntary prisoner within it. The boards on the windows, the reinforced locks, all seem useless now. Nothing can protect me from what is here with me. That night was different. I was more tired than usual, my mind a whirlwind of disconnected thoughts. The tapes were playing on the screen, but I no longer paid attention. I didn't need to. I knew what would happen. Each scream, each sigh of the girl was already etched in my memory. I closed my eyes for a moment, but the horror continued, relentless. Suddenly, the sound changed. It was no longer the sound of the tapes, but something closer. The noise of footsteps in the hallway, a subtle creaking of the floorboards, as if someone was inside my house. My eyes opened, but I didn't move. I was petrified. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, but the sound persisted. It wasn't the first time I heard such things, but now it seemed more real than ever. The girl appeared again, but this time she wasn't distant like a shadow. She was in the middle of my room, standing between me and the door, her eyes fixed on mine. I couldn't move. Terror immobilized me to the point where all I could do was watch her, bracing for the worst. Then, something strange happened. Her expression changed. The terror in her eyes was replaced by an unsettling calm, and she began to move toward me, slowly and deliberately. When she was a few steps away, something clicked in my mind, and I stood up abruptly, stumbling backward. My head spun, and the floor seemed to move beneath my feet. I ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. It was locked, as always. But now, it felt like something, or someone, was holding it from the other side. I pushed with all my strength, but it was futile. The darkness around me seemed to come alive, and the room was closing in on me. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder, and when I finally managed to open the door, there was nowhere to go. The hallway was different. It seemed longer, darker, with shadows moving as I progressed. The girl was everywhere now, whispering my name, calling out to me, begging for help or perhaps for revenge. I no longer knew what was real and what was the product of my disturbed mind. When I finally reached the living room, I saw that the tapes were playing on their own, one after the other. The images flashed on the screen, but something was different. The basement where the girl was trapped seemed clearer, more detailed. It was as if I could feel the dampness of that place, the smell of mildew, the coldness of the concrete. And then I saw something that made me stop. There, in the depths of one of the tapes, among the shadows, was my house. Not the girl's basement, but my basement. The camera moved, slowly and deliberately, down the stairs to the basement. My heart almost stopped as I recognized every detail. The cracks in the walls, the old trunk in the corner, everything was there. The image wobbled as the camera approached something on the floor. When the view finally focused, I saw my own body. I was lying there, in the middle of the basement, with eyes wide and empty, like the girl's. My heart raced, and reality began to unravel around me. I no longer knew who I was, where I was, or what was real. I was trapped between two worlds, the living and the dead, with no way out. The last thing I remember is the sound of footsteps approaching again, this time slow and calculated. I no longer had the strength to fight, no will to resist. I fell to the ground, feeling the cold of the concrete rise up my back, and the darkness enveloped me completely. I don't know if I am alive or dead. Perhaps I fell victim to a trap, a cruel prank by the creator of the tapes. Or perhaps I have finally succumbed to the madness I have cultivated myself. But one thing is certain, there are things in this world that should never be seen, secrets that should never be unearthed. I found something I was never meant to find, and now I am trapped, forever, in the depths of my own mind.